It's so good to see all of you and to be sharing this time in this space. Thank you for being here, and thank you, Darren and Josh and Chad, for helping create the container for us to share. So the title of my talk is Finding the Boon in the Heroine or Hero's Journey, the Courageous Act of Self-Love. This topic has been touched upon throughout today already, which I feel so grateful that it's coming into the room and into our discussions. And I feel like, Jahan, your second poem essentially captures everything that I want to talk about today. So that was a deep resonance in my soul and my own journey that you captured in that. So thank you. For the last year, I've been working with children. I do therapy with children, kindergarten through 5th grade. And I meet with them once a week individually, and we take an hour to play together. And the one thing that these children have taught me more than anything else is the best way that we communicate who we are and how we're feeling is by making somebody else feel the way that we're feeling. These children tell me what their inner subjective world is like by the way in which they make me feel in the room. That's called my countertransference to them. The emotions and feelings that I have when I'm in their presence is how they are experiencing the world. And I'm going to be using a lot of what I've learned from them in my talk today, and I'll go more specifically into that in a moment. So, to me, one way to understand patriarchy is that it's a relational wound. That all of our traumas come from a relational disconnection, a feeling of being abandoned, a feeling of being deeply unseen, rejected, neglected. And this often happens in our earliest childhood experiences. And it's the most painful when it happens between us and our parents. You weren't adequately loved by your mother. She didn't really see who you were. She could only see a projection of her own expectations, fears, and wishes and place them upon you. Therefore, unable to attune to your vibrational frequency and form an authentic relationship with you, a bond that created trust, and most of all, a bond that was supposed to create self-love through her adequate mirroring and reflecting to you of your psyche. Or your father wasn't there because he didn't emotionally grow up, because he didn't have any role models to teach him how to do that. And so he couldn't actually have an emotional connection with you. Or maybe he wasn't present at all. Or even worse, he was in so much pain that he hit you, or he sexually abused you, or he crossed some kind of boundary. Maybe this happened with your siblings. Maybe there's incest in your family. Maybe you've been raped, or maybe you've raped somebody. We all carry these deep, deep, deep wounds in us in one way or another, and it's experienced as shame, the most insidious, infectious emotion that there is. When you're in a group of people, and the moment that you start to feel shame in your body, it's the heat in your belly, your face turning red, you just want to crawl up or run out of the room. You can almost always guarantee that at least one other person in the room is feeling it as well, and you're sharing that experience in the morphic field. I wish that when I was 5 years old, someone would have taught me that when I feel rejected by somebody, it's because they're probably feeling rejected. Or that when I'm made to feel inferior, that person's probably feeling inferior. But the way in which they compensate for that is by acting superior to me, that they know better than me, that they're right and I'm wrong. Patriarchy, if it is a relational wound, can only be healed in, by, and through relationship. All of our relations are the birth canal of who we are. And just as the sun must descend into each night, in order to be reborn in a process of renewal through destruction and recreation, so must the solar principle of the heroine or hero inside of each of us descend into the underworld in order to have the opportunity to be renewed. The underworld is a perilous realm because it contains the darkest monsters of the psyche that we have to encounter and face on our journey in order to actually step into our creative power and our gifts that we were meant to give to this world. Shame, fear, malice, murderous hatred, greed, envy, all of those disavowed, unwanted, rejected, and unowned aspects of each one of our psyches lies within this underworld, within the shadow. But as Jung said, the shadow is a regenerative force. In it lie our greatest gifts. And the paradox is that we have to go into the underworld, face these demons, face these monsters, in order to have the reclamation of self, which is where our libido, our creativity, and our vitality exists. And just as Jahan pointed out, it's not so much that it's counterintuitive or unnatural, but that our egoic structure, our ally in helping us have any sense of cohesion in this archetypal pantheon of every possible vibrational frequency one could imagine that exists inside of us, this ego has to die to an old way of being in order to experience what was once other or monstrous as self. And that actually gives us more colors to paint with. It gives us more energy to co-create with. I think that for a lot of us, it's really easy to fall in love with the cosmos, right? To fall in love with the divine, to fall in love with the transpersonal, to fall in love with the transcendent, to fall in love with love. But it's one of the hardest, most messy, confusing things to actually be able to fall in love with ourselves. To actually experience genuine self-love and self-worth and self-value, where you actually have the felt experience on a continuous basis that you are worthy of belonging, that you are worthy of connection, that you are worthy to inhabit this time and this space. And then, on top of all of that, you're actually worthy of expressing your inner subjective reality irrespective of what's actually happening inside of you. If the human being is the cosmos getting to know itself through us, and if we are an integral part of the cosmos, interwoven into its web, inseparable from this earth, then doesn't it seem paramount to actually love ourselves in order to be able to truly love the cosmos? To fall in love with the enchantment of the cosmos means that we have to fall in love with the enchantment of ourselves. Now, you can fall in love with the cosmos first, and it's a great doorway, it's a great cosmological mirror for you to then be able to fall in love with yourself, as many of us take that path. But I think that can only go so far. And I think there becomes a point where just falling in love with the cosmos or falling in love with the starry heavens isn't enough. We have to take it a step further and fall in love with ourselves. But again, paradoxically, the way that we do that is by facing the parts of ourselves that we don't love and that inhibit us and prohibit us from actually experience love on a true, deep level. If you haven't had a chance to see the TED Talks by Brené Brown on the power of vulnerability and listening to shame, I would recommend that you do that as soon as you have a chance. She describes that shame is the fear of disconnection, and it also unravels connection. Shame is the fear that if you are truly seen for who you really are, for where you've really come from and what you've really done in your life, that you are not going to be accepted loved, and therefore you are not going to belong. You're going to be rejected from community. And as Shannon pointed out, that is a vital threat to our being because we are literally dependent upon one another for our survival. So if I'm dependent upon you for my survival and you actually see who I really am and you don't like it, does that mean I cease to exist? If you choose not to see me, how much of me can really come into this room? So each one of my clients comes into therapy with feelings of being rejected, neglected, unseen, inferior, and inadequate, often in the eyes of their parents, their siblings, and their teachers. The institution of school is not very good at seeing us for who we are, right? So there's no better place to see society's shadow material than in our children, because they are one of the most vulnerable populations that exist. So from a family systems perspective, the child, who's often considered the identified patient, the one who's showing the symptoms of the system, they're actually considered heroic because they are trying to shine a light upon which has been regulated to the underworld, right? And often when we're working with children, we're actually treating the parents and their family systems, but the parents have too much shame to actually come in and get help and to be seen for who they are, and so we work with the children to try and help make a second order change, to actually shift the system in of itself. It's really difficult to do. So symptomatically, shame shows up in us as addiction, eating disorders, anxiety, depression, cutting. It shows up in all forms of escapism and masking and numbing pain. Whatever your mode of doing that is, we each have our own special one that we use, or special ones we use to do that. It also shows up in obsessive compulsive disorders, the need for perfectionism and to control the environment, to reduce any sense of anxiety that one may be feeling in their imperfection and infallibility. And shame is one of the most excruciatingly uncomfortable states that we could possibly be in. We do everything we can to escape from it. As Brené Brown says, shame needs three things to grow: secrecy, silence, and judgment. So what is the antidote then to shame? And she says that it's empathy. It's not just empathy, but it's being witnessed in a loving way, to actually be able to first locate your shame, which a lot of us are so unconscious that we have it that we don't even know we have it. But first to locate it, preferably somewhere in the body. Maybe it has an image, maybe it has a color, maybe it has a memory, a sensation. And we locate our shame, and we find it, and we begin to own it. And we can do as much inner work as we want in our own separate, autonomous lives. And that can get us to a certain point of self-awareness, which is essential and beautiful. But to actually heal the shame, we have to be witnessed in it. Somebody else has to see us in that state of inferiority, smallness, inadequacy, imperfection. And they have to love us through it. They have to mirror to us, through their empathy, that our subjective worldview is not only real, but it is worthy and makes sense. There's an intelligence in it, there's meaning in it, there's purpose in it, and we're not wrong for feeling that way. Whether we were the perpetrator or the victim. Two different sides of the same coin. It doesn't matter which part of the gestalt you have shame about, the shame is in the field. I suffer too. I'm imperfect too. I'm scared. To be seen in that place is the redemptive act, and it's how we reclaim our creative power. It's how we reclaim ourself. And once we can do that, nobody can ever take that from you. No one can ever take away from you your rock bottom, because when you're in rock bottom, what you find is you. Every time I die, at first, sometimes, depending on the state I'm in, I panic a little bit, right? And as soon as I'm done panicking and I take a breath and I go, oh shit, I'm still here. Everywhere I go, there I am. I can get as high as I want, I can get as low as I want, and the common denominator is me, and I'm part of every one of those experiences. So how do I learn to live with my eternity? How do I learn to love myself? How do I learn to self-forgive and have acceptance for having experiences that are part of the entire spectrum of possibility? The entire cosmos seems to be living inside of us. That means every god and goddess, every archetype. And it means their whole range of expression, their light and their shadow, the whole multivalent range of the gods and the goddesses or the archetypes, the energies, or however you experience it, lives inside each one of us. And when we don't want to live with it because it's excruciating, we project it out onto everyone else in our life. Often the people closest to us, but it doesn't have to be. Our parents, our siblings, our lovers, our friends. And we do it by criticizing them and judging them and blaming them and doing anything we can to discharge the ugly, messy, painful feelings that I have of this disgust about who I am, what I've done, and where I've been. So how do we break that pattern of violence, as Stephen Goodman talked about? How do we break those patterns of war? Well, one way to do it is when you're with somebody who's activating these feelings inside of you of being inferior or less than or unworthy, shame, guilt, whatever it is that you're feeling. The way to detach from that experience is by coming in and offering that person a different reflection than the one that they are unconsciously trying to evoke from you. Right? We all go around unconsciously constellating our original traumas and woundings, expecting that the same thing will continue to happen over and over and over again. It's the recursive feedback of our lives that we call reality, our reality. And so I know that you're going to abandon me, so I'm going to act in a way that unconsciously pulls from you to abandon me. And so the best thing that you, the other, can do for me in loving kindness is provide me a different reflection than the one that I'm trying to grab from you. And the best way to do that is just to have empathy for me, to not try to fix me, make me better, make me right, make me wrong. I don't need any of that. I just need you to affirm my experience and to say, hey, that must be really hard not feeling accepted. Man, that must be a lot for you to carry, feeling rejected all the time. Yeah, thank you for seeing me. All of a sudden, there's this space that's opened up in my being that it feels like I have a choice all of a sudden to do something different than I've been doing simply by the act of your witnessing of my pain and my suffering. How do we honor the feminine principle in all of us? How do we honor the chthonic? All she's asking, the dark goddess, the dark feminine, all she wants is for us to bear witness to her pain and her suffering, to the disavowed, unowned aspects of psyche that nobody wants to feel. So she carries it, and she feels it, and she has a lot of rage. And she carries it in her body as disease, as cancer, as a heart attack, as migraines. Whatever your special dose is of how she carries it in you, that's where she's storing it. And she's holding on to it until we're ready to just bear witness to her and what she's trying to teach us and the intelligence that's in her suffering. And she's not asking to overtake the rational world. She's not asking to overtake the masculine. She just wants to be an equal, to be valued as an equal at the table. I want to make sure that I have 5 minutes left for that's where I'm at now. experience, right? Because somewhere along the way, it was unsafe for you to actually feel what you were feeling because your parents or whoever were your caretakers couldn't handle the affect. So the therapist helps you start to feel contained, which allows you to start coming into your body and then regress back to those infantile states that are often pre-verbal and locate in a very kind of non-verbal, because it's a pre-verbal state, the emotions, sensations, and bodily experiences of where the shame is. And then memories start to come in, images start to come in, all sorts of things start to come in that then become the fertile ground for your analytic work and processing and moving through those different experiences so that ultimately you can create more space between you and your experience so that you're not so identified with it that you are essentially imprisoned in your own reality. And you start to recognize that there's actually more choice to relive your inner world in other ways than you have been, right? We are our greatest imprisoners, our greatest limiters. So yeah, it's through curiosity and feeling safe to go deep within the body and have a deep meditative experience in the body with a witness that allows you to start locating and processing the shame. That's one way that I know.
Where are we going? Here?
That was really powerful. I was moved to tears because you really hit on my experience in my life. I really appreciate you bringing up the witness, because I think about, okay, if there's a collective shadow that needs to be faced, if we just went out and said to everyone, okay, face your shadow and integrate it into your life, I would be afraid to leave my house. So, and then I think also there's
I'm already afraid to leave my house.
There's so much psychic material, and the monsters can be so strong, and we don't necessarily live in a society that nurtures healthy ego development.
Yeah.
Learning, that's, and we're disconnected from elders. Just all of those things put together, I think that's why the work you're doing and the work all of us are doing here, I respect it so much, because we're learning how to bear witness to ourselves and hopefully bear witness for others, because it's the kind of work that could help everybody. And I've seen people do it alone and it not go well. So I really appreciate you bringing that emphasis to the conversation.
Yeah.
People get an offer for appreciation for their own appreciation.
Sure.
Because it directly correlates, of course. The way you're drawing the microcosmic, macrocosmic correlation between the personal healing, the healing between self and other, and the movement of the whole cosmos and the earth and the society, and getting over that, the way you're drawing those correlations is awesome. It's really the way that the individual process is relating via the psychotherapeutic approach to the individual relationship, but also, more importantly, the way you're drawing that to the whole cosmic, macrocosmic movement of healing, of the, I can like feel it from my fingertips, but the acceptation of that dark goddess in this particular place and time, and the way in which you're relating how the individual process is a microcosmic reflection of that macrocosmic becoming is just, it's great, because I think that's something we do well, and you hold that really powerfully, and it's awesome.
Thank you, Hunter. Thanks, Lydia.
That was rock solid. Your talk was the Boon. So I really value what you're saying about the reflection of the therapist. And I also am wondering, in keeping with Hillman's book, we've had 100 years of psychotherapy and the world's getting worse.
Yeah.
God love him.
It's a certain kind of psychotherapy.
I still believe in the healing that can arise very uniquely through that context with the psychotherapist, but I'm wondering about the future of psychotherapy is being increasingly systemic, bringing the other in whenever possible, whether that be a sibling or the family, as you mentioned, or the lover, or even the best friend, all our relationships. And I just read an article by an MFT who's operating from attachment-based therapy with couples and family structures, who said that in his experience, he's come to believe that the healing that can arise through that dyadic or systemic process, is 1,000 times more lasting and effective than whatever the therapist can evoke. So I just wonder your thoughts about that.
I don't really have adequate time to address your really important question. I just will briefly say that I think that it's both and I do agree that, if you can get the whole family into the room, that's what's happening. It's a systemic issue, and then the identified patient becomes the one person. I mean, we all have the identified patient in our family. You're probably them. That's probably why you're here. But, they're the scapegoat. They're the weirdo. They're the freak. They're the black sheep. Anyways, there is, for me, my experience of psychotherapy and the way that I've gone about it is it's one of the deepest forms of prayer. Because we are our greatest vessels of change, and that's all we really can change is ourselves. And the change that we do within the dyad of the therapy process ripples out into the rest of our life, and it forces the people around us to begin their path to do that work as well. And yes, there are, it's ideal if you can get the couple in or you can get the family in. And there's work that is meant to be done one-on-one. There are certain things that you are meant to do with one other person that is for you. And will always stay in that room on one level and then will emanate through your being on every other level of your existence for the rest of your life. And everyone in your life will benefit from it. Right? So the best things to change in the things that we don't like about our parents or other people in our life, the best way to change that is to change it in ourselves. Gandhi wasn't kidding when he said, be the change you wish to see in the world. It's no joke. Do I have time for one more?
It'll be quick. I just really, really want to say thank you. It's so beautiful to see your journey, and coming to this conference and presenting on this is amazing. And what I really want to say is that I think that what you're doing right now is addressing the shame about shame.
Yes.
Because that is a huge piece that stops people from even getting anywhere near it. And that part is intense.
So intense.
You can't even get to the first step of acknowledging your shame because there's so much shame that comes up around shame.
Yes.
And this is what is actually going to help that process, is talking about it in public, bringing it out. I mean, that's the antidote in itself, is bringing it out of the dark
Bringing it out,
and
yeah.
bringing it into relationships. So thank you.
Thank you. Great. Thank you.